Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to be going over the artist and her add-ons. I'll be giving a quick description of how her power works, rating her add-ons from best to worst, and then giving you recommendations for some of my favorite add-on combinations to bring in matches and why they work. This is the first video in a small series of how to play the artist that I'm working on, so I hope you enjoy it and I'll get right to the video. Before I get into her add-ons, I'm going to be going over how her power works. That way, if you don't really understand why the add-ons work and why I'm rating them, this will give you a better understanding. Her power is called the Birds of Torment. When you press the power button, you are able to summon a dire crow. In the match, you either have a minimum of 2 or a maximum of 4, depending on the add-ons, but you typically spawn with 3. The dire crows will spawn a second apart, and the ability button launches the dire crows. Dire crows stay idle for a limited amount of time and can inflict damage in the flight path, which is about 8 meters. Anything longer than that, or if there's an obstacle in the way, they will turn into a swarm. The aura of the swarm is white, and it'll show for a limited time when the survivor is repelling or if they haven't repelled but still have the crows on them. When going through an environment, the crows will reveal survivors within the killer instinct, which is a bit inconsistent, I will say this, but there are add-ons to kind of combat that, or if you really want to rely on the killer instinct. Crows can be repelled instantly in lockers by having a flashlight shined on them or using a flashbang. This works for idle crows as well. Video, I'm going to be going over an entire tier list from A to D on what I think the artist's best and worst add-ons are. I'm going to be starting with A tier, and to begin off A tier, Severed Hands is probably my favorite add-on by far when it comes to the artist. Severed Hands works by having any survivor near another survivor be swarmed while also becoming swarmed. This is great because it acts as a built-in discordance and works as a slowdown for survivors having to stop whatever they're doing in order to repel or risk the chance of being hit or downed if they happen to be across the map. Silver Bell is the oblivious status effect when swarmed. This one is nice because oftentimes you can sneak up on survivors outside of a chase, and it raises the likelihood that you will get hits, downs, or grabs because they at least expect you to coming towards them if they're not paying attention. Thorny Nest is the hemorrhage and mangled status effect when damaged by a dire crow. This one is the artist's quote-unquote sloppy butcher add-on. It pairs really well with perks like Thanatophobia and helps slow things down in the game, especially when it comes to having Circle of Healing. Festering Carrion is the cooldown after the dire crow takes flight by half a second, so it takes it from 5 seconds to 4.5 seconds if you send off one crow, and you can just take off half a second accordingly. This is a really good quality of life add-on. While the half second doesn't seem like much, this one definitely is my favorite when it comes to chases. O Grief O Lover is the exhausted status effect when swarmed. While survivors can't dead hard while repelling, it negates balance landing, overcome, or life if they are repelling at the same time. For B tier, these are the add-ons that I tend to not reach for as often as something in A tier, but they still do help in-game. The first one I have is Darkest Ink. This one is the blindness status effect, and it persists for 15 seconds after they're done repelling when swarmed. This one is nice because of the fact that the effect continues after they finish repelling, unlike something like O Grief O Lover, where the exhausted status effect only lasts until they are no longer swarmed. Charcoal Stick, the aura crows are no longer visible, but they are visible for half a second when summoning 2 survivors. This one is really good for mind-gameable pallets or windows. Because the crow is invisible, survivors have to second-guess their movements when they're trying to avoid hits. Baby Shoes is that the aura of survivors within 5 meters of a dire crow are revealed for 3 seconds when initially placed. This is really good for jungle gyms that have a lot of line of sight broken that are easily mind-gameable. Untitled Agony is the hindered status effect for 1.5 seconds when swarmed. This is nice for the survivors that tend to W space away from the killer because it allows you to catch up to them a lot easier. Velvet Fabric is when the swarm's aura is visible for an extra 1.5 seconds when repelling. It goes from a baseline of 2.5 seconds to 4 seconds. This is nice for the survivors that are really far away and you need to aim another crow to either get a hit or a down on them. This is also really nice if you're new to the artist and need more visibility for the survivor. Automatic Drawing is the last one for the B tier. It reduces the idle cooldown by 1.5 seconds, so it becomes almost instantaneous by the cooldown being only half a second. This one is really nice in chases when survivors tend to wait for you to place a crow and then run away from the tile. I tend to not shoot off more than 1 crow at a time in chases, so I want to have my crows come back to me as quickly as possible. So for C tier, these add-ons are still pretty valid, but I find that I don't get much value out of them or they don't really fit within my playstyle. The first one that I have is Ink Egg. This gives you 4 dire crows, but the idle time is reduced by 4 seconds, so 10 seconds becomes 6. The cooldown of all 4 crows is 14 seconds, which isn't really favorable in chases, but this does well for doubled stagger hits or going for a full 4 crow down. The next one we have is Severed Tongue. This is the slowdown of the artist when crows take flight by half a second. So when you send off a crow as the artist, you're a little bit slower than normal, so this one kind of decreases that. This is more of a quality of life change than a good add-on, but it can be nice when combined with other add-ons. Next we have our Eerie Feather, which decreases the crows that you have by 1, so you have 2, but you gain the undetectable status effect during your cooldown. This is really good for chases and mind gaming, but it's not my favorite and definitely doesn't feel like an eerie add-on. Thick Tar increases the repel time by half a second, so 8 seconds becomes 8.5. Good for when you're learning Birdie and works well in combination with a lot of other add-ons, but it isn't really my favorite to bring. Garden of Rot is her other eerie add-on. Once the survivor is done repelling, they suffer from the exposed status effect for 4 seconds. This one is not my favorite because of the lack of hindered effect that Redhead's Pinky Finger gives, which is the other comparable add-on to this. Redhead's Pinky Finger belongs to Clown, and the way that it works is that once the survivor is hit directly with an intoxicated bottle, they get the exposed status effect for 4 seconds. Because the survivor has to finish repelling, you really need to catch them in an open area, and if they're swift, oftentimes they just keep the crows on them and take the hit, so it only really works once. Still Life Crow increases the idle time by 4 seconds, so it makes the base 10 seconds go up to 14 seconds. I don't really like to bring idle time add-ons because I want my crows back to me as quickly as possible, but if you tend to camp hooks with crows, you will probably find this one a little bit more favorable. Finally, we have her D tier add-ons. These are the add-ons that I really never bring unless someone redeems me to bring them specifically, but I just don't really like them. The first two are Vibrant Obituary and Oil Paints. These both have to do with the Killer Instinct. Vibrant Obituary increases the Killer Instinct duration by 1.5 seconds, and Oil Paint increases the Killer Instinct radius by 1.5 meters. The Killer Instinct for Birdie can be really inconsistent, but if you struggle with finding survivors, then these might be really nice to bring. And the last one is Chaclo Corn increases the idle time of crows by 2 seconds, so it makes it from the base 10 up to 12. Again, I'm not a fan of idle time add-ons, but if you like to camp hooks, then this is a really cheap one to bring. So on the screen, I have the tier list in its entirety. In the next section of the video, I'm going to be going over my favorite combinations for people to try, along with an explanation of why the two add-ons work well together. Hi guys, so in this portion of the video, I'm going to be going over add-on combinations and kind of what I bring to have the best success rate in matches, or kind of use the add-ons that aren't really viable on their own and kind of making them into something that really helps out in chases. To start off, my favorite and kind of my go-to add-on combination includes something like Festering Carry-On, which is the half-second decrease of the cooldown, and I either pair it with Oh Grief, Oh Lover, Silver Bell, or especially Thorny Nest if I end up bringing something like Thanatophobia. This is typically what I end up bringing in about 90% of my matches. Next, I really recommend Festering Carry-On and Severed Tongue. This gives you a quick recovery in chases since the cooldown is reduced and you're not as slow as you initially would be after sending off the crows. Next, I'm going to be recommending Automatic Drawing and Matthias's Baby Shoes. This combination can be really fun for mind gameable palettes if you're kind of like me and you just refuse to break them in chase. The next combination I'm going to recommend is Velvet Fabric and Thick Tar. This combination is really good for long-range crow attacks, or if you're kind of new to the artist and you don't know how to work the crows, this really helps with visualizing where the survivor is going and the timing for the attacks. The next combination I'm going to recommend is Ink Egg and Still Life Crow. With Ink Egg, you can technically get a 4 crow down. When you have staggered hits with the 2 crows, you can actually kind of combine this and have the 4 crows hit into a down. It's really hard to pull off in game, and the survivor just basically has to be standing still for 15 seconds, which almost never happens. But if you wanted to try it out, I recommend pairing it with Still Life Crow. The cooldown for 4 crows is 14 seconds, which also can make a break or chase, so make sure to use it wisely. But Still Life Crow helps negate the cooldown that the Ink Egg brings, since it decreases the time that the Dire Crow is going to stay idle by 4 seconds, and this increases it by 4 seconds. I'm going to be talking about her eerie add-ons now and kind of what gives you the most value when bringing them. I actually really recommend Eerie Feather and Ink Egg because Eerie Feather takes away 1 crow and Ink Egg brings 1 crow. You'll have a longer undetectable status effect and you won't be kind of lost without having all 3 of your crows. And then this one will make you undetectable for 12 seconds. Her other eerie add-on is Garden of Rot, and I'm going to recommend that you pair it with Untitled Agony. This will kind of help you if you have a survivor that's really far away and you hit them with Garden of Rot. Because it gives them the hindered status effect for 1.5 seconds, you'll be able to catch up a lot quicker and hopefully get to take advantage of having the exposed status effect for 4 seconds. Next, I'm going to recommend Still Life Crow or Charcoal Stick. This is kind of for those unmind gameable palettes or the ones that you tend to have to bloodlust around to break, but this can also really help in large loops or for when you need to corral survivors and to move into the right area or an unsafe area. While I mentioned this before, this one specifically, Severed Hands and Silver Bell, will create multiple oblivious survivors at once, which really helps when creating pressure in matches. Next, I'm going to be recommending Darkest Ink and Oh Grief, Oh Lover. I call this the Fearmonger or Mindbreaker combination because of the blindness status effect and the exhausted status effect. And finally, I'm going to be recommending Severed Tongue and Untitled Agony. This is the anti-W space build for the survivors that just kind of drop pallets and run instead of actually looping the tile. This really helps out to be able to catch up to them and kind of get the most out of your Dire Crows or your chase. Alright, if you made it to the end of the video, thank you guys so much for watching. Again, I said earlier that this is just going to be the first video in a small series that I'm working on for Carmina. She is my favorite killer in this game, and I absolutely love playing her, and I really want other people to be able to play her too, so I hope you found something in this video beneficial or informational. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to follow me on Twitch. That's where I am live most. I'm live Monday through Friday starting at 7 p.m. Eastern. Feel free to like and subscribe, leave a comment down below, and if you have any suggestions for videos, let me know.